From prisoners of war to people being held for ransom, all the way to some horrifying situations where people were saved thanks to their quick thinking. Here are the top 10 mysterious secret messages sent by hostages. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the ransom. Quite recently, in September of this year, 2 men were sentenced to time in a federal prison after being convicted of holding 4 people hostage for ransom. On November 19th, 2020, the 2 men encountered 4 people who had crossed the Rio Grande and offered them a ride to San Antonio in exchange for payment. While they told them that this is where they were going, they actually instead took these people to one of the men's houses, where they then forced each of them to call their family members and ask for $4,000 in exchange for their release. For 3 days, they held these people hostage and threatened them with weapons. They repeatedly forced them to record video and voice messages, make video calls, send texts, and just beg for ransom money. The 2 captors also spoke directly to the families and told them that if they refused payment, the hostages would be harmed. Ultimately, the family members contacted authorities who were able to discover a general location of where the calls were originating from. The 2 captors noticed law enforcement in the area, so they loaded the hostages into a vehicle and transported them to an industrial park, where they then dropped them off and said that they would return. The hostages then were able to borrow a phone from a truck driver nearby, where they called for help. The authorities came to pick them up and brought them to safety. In our number 9 spot today, we have the flight attendant. Sheila Frederick is a flight attendant for Alaska Airlines who is also a hero. She was working on a flight that was headed from Seattle to San Francisco when she noticed a girl who was slightly disheveled looking and who had a look on her face like she had been through hell. This struck Sheila as a bit odd, especially considering she was traveling with a man who was really well dressed and put together. With the alarm bells ringing in her head, Sheila decided to do something. Sheila tried to talk to the pair, and that is when the man became quite defensive. Sheila secretly mouthed to the girl after making eye contact, "Go to the bathroom," where she had left a notepad and a pen for the girl. On the pad, the girl left a note that read, quote, "I need help," and this is when Sheila alerted the pilot, who made sure that the police were waiting at the terminal when they arrived. This is when it was learned that prior to this flight, the girl had been held hostage by the man for 2 months. Thanks to Sheila's not only quick thinking but ability to recognize the signs, she is an absolute hero for saving that girl and working to get her the help that she needed. In our number 8 spot today, we have Grubhub. Earlier this year, in June, a woman was rescued from a hostage situation after placing an order on Grubhub. This is because the quick-thinking woman put a message in the additional notes section of her order. Usually when restaurants get these, they are expecting to see like "no onions" or "hold the mayo," but instead they got a horrifying message that read, quote, "Please call the police. He's going to call me when you delivered. Come with the cones. Please don't make it obvious." The restaurant, which was the Chipper Truck in the Bronx, and according to their Facebook page, the order came in before 5 a.m. The post said, quote, "I've often heard of this happening but never thought it would happen to us. Thankfully we were open and able to help her." The restaurant responded to the note and called the authorities, who arrived on scene at about 6:20 a.m. Here they not only rescued the 24-year-old victim, but they also arrested Kimoy Royal, who was charged with not only these crimes but was also accused of a terrible crime in another incident from just days prior to this one. Thankfully the woman was able to be saved by her smart moves, and the restaurant responded in the correct way to help her. In our number 7 spot today, we have Morse Code. Jeremiah Andrew Denton Jr. was an American politician and a military officer who was taken captive during the Vietnam War. He was held for nearly 8 years after the A-6 intruder he was flying was shot down in 1965. He was one of the first as well as one of the highest ranking officers to be taken prisoner, which is why he was often forced by his captors to participate in propaganda interviews that would be broadcast in the United States. During this interview, as he answered questions and pretended to be having trouble with the bright television lights, he blinked in Morse code to spell the word torture, which confirmed for the first time to US naval intelligence that the United States prisoners of war were in fact being tortured. Jeremiah was saved in the end, and in fact he was the first of all American POWs who were released by Hanoi to stop off an American plane after Operation Homecoming. In our number 6 spot today, we have Family Fortune. Patricia Hearst is the granddaughter of the publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst, and while her father was among the heirs of the fortune, he did not have control of it, so he did not see a need to get his children personal security. That was until February 4th, 1974, when Patricia was kidnapped from her Berkeley, apartment. It soon became known that she had been taken by a small left-wing guerrilla group called the Symbionese Liberation Army, or the SLA. Apparently, the initial idea for the kidnapping was to leverage the Hearst family's influence to free 2 SLA members who had been imprisoned for killing Marcus Foster in 1973, who was the superintendent of Oakland Public Schools. The state refused to free the men, so then the SLA demanded that the family give $70 worth of food to every Californian in need. Here's where the story gets really crazy though. According to Patricia herself, she was at first held for a week in a closet, blindfolded and with her hands tied. During this time, the SLA founder was constantly threatening her. She was then let out for meals, still blindfolded, but she suddenly began to participate in the group's political discussions. Eventually, she was given a flashlight for reading and SLA political tracts to memorize while she was being held in the closet for weeks. On April 3rd, 1974, 2 months after she was abducted, Patricia announced on an audio tape that she had joined the SLA and taken the name Tanya. She later said that the leader of the group, quote, told me that the War Council had decided or was thinking about killing me or me staying with them, and that I better start thinking about that as a possibility. She continued on with, quote, I accommodated my thoughts to coincide with theirs. 19 months after being taken, Patricia was found and arrested because by this time she was wanted for serious crimes that she had committed with the group. She was held in custody and many speculated that her family ties might help her to avoid prosecution. At her trial, prosecutors suggested that she had joined the group of her own free will, but Patricia said that this was not the case and that she was harmed and threatened into it. In 1976, she was convicted for the crime of bank robbery and sentenced to 35 years in prison, which was later reduced to just 7 years before her sentence was commuted by President Jimmy Carter, and she was later even pardoned by President Bill Clinton. In our number 5 spot today, we have Wordle. This one is a little different from the others on this list today because it has to do more with the message that didn't get sent. In February of this year, an 80-year-old woman was taken hostage in her own home when she was awoken in the early hours of the morning to find a naked man standing over top of her with a pair of scissors. He threatened to harm her if she made any noise, and he got into bed with her before later locking her in the basement. Despite the fact that she wasn't able to alert anybody of what was happening, her family was still notified. This is because while the woman was trapped in her Illinois home, her daughter in California grew worried when her mom didn't text her Wordle score. Apparently, her mom sent her the score of the daily word guessing game every day, and when she didn't receive this update, she began to get worried. Another one of her daughters also grew concerned when she didn't receive a reply to her text messages, so together the women decided to contact the police and ask for a welfare check. When the police arrived, they found a broken window which made them enter the premises. From here, they freed the woman from the locked basement and notified the SWAT team. The following day, authorities were able to catch the suspect, who was identified as James H. Davis III, who was charged with home invasion with a dangerous weapon, aggravated kidnapping, as well as other charges relating to how he reacted to authorities when they went to arrest him. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Pizza Hut message. Back in 2015, Cheryl Treadway and her then boyfriend were arguing throughout the day, and at some point he began holding a large knife. Cheryl tried to leave to pick up her children from school, but when that happened, he grabbed her, took her phone, and followed her along the trip. Once home, the situation only continued, but it was worse now that she had picked them up from school. At around 3:50 p.m., Cheryl thankfully was able to convince him to let her order a pizza through the Pizza Hut app. In the messages section for the delivery, Cheryl included a message that read, quote, please help, get 911 to me, and 911 hostage help. While he quickly took the phone back from Cheryl, the Pizza Hut employees got the message. They saw the order was from a frequent customer, but thought it was best to call the police to investigate, which they did. When the police arrived to the home, Cheryl ran outside to them. Authorities spoke to the boyfriend for about 20 minutes before he too came out of the home, and he was subsequently arrested and charged with aggravated assault with a weapon without intent to kill, battery, false imprisonment, and obstructing justice by depriving communication to law enforcement. As for the Pizza Hut manager, they said, quote, I've been here for 28 years and never seen nothing like that come through. In our number 3 spot today, we have The Journalist. About a decade ago, in November of 2012, James Foley was an American journalist who was abducted in northern Syria as he was there covering the country's civil war. He was held for years and was unable to contact his family as every letter he wrote was confiscated by those who were holding him. Unfortunately, James would go on in 2014 to have his life taken by the captors, who released a video of his killing, which is just absolutely horrific. Before this terrible day, however, James asked another person who had also been held hostage but was about to be released to commit a letter to memory in order to be able to deliver it to James' family which he did. The last letter home is heartbreaking to read. I can't imagine the feeling it must have brought for those who knew and loved James. While this story is horrifying and the end isn't a happy one, I'm very glad that this letter was able to make it home in the end. For the person who actually took James' life, while they were masked in the video, authorities were able to find out his true identity, and in November of 2015, he was killed in a targeted drone strike. In our number 2 spot today, we have the delivery guy. So we've talked about people leaving notes for the restaurant when they ordered food, but this one is a little different from that. In this case, it was an observant delivery guy who noticed what was going on. When Joey Grundle went to deliver pizza to a home, a man answered the door, but behind the man he saw a woman who pointed to her visibly black eye and mouthed the words, "Help me." It turns out that the two inside of the home were a former couple who had split in August of 2018. She had moved into her own home, but by the end of September the man entered her home without her permission. When she went to call the police, he took the phone from her and allegedly dragged her towards the staircase. The woman told detectives that she attempted to escape by hitting him in the groin, however he fought back, giving her a bloody nose and black eye. Thankfully, he made the mistake of ordering the pizza, and equally as thankfully, the driver noticed what looked like a terrible situation and knew to call 911. When the officers arrived, the man didn't let the woman open the door at first, but eventually gave up and the woman was freed and he was taken into custody. He was later charged with kidnapping, a bunch of charges relating to the harm that he caused her, as well as false imprisonment and intimidation of a victim. In our number 1 spot today, we have the secret message. In 1940, Sub-Lieutenant John Pryor was captured at Dunkirk and sent to a German POW camp. He was held here for 5 years, but as a reward for good behavior, he was allowed to send letters home to his family and parents. Little did anyone in his family know at the time, though, these letters contained secret messages. Despite several attempts, people were failing at cracking the code until mathematics professor David McMullen took a crack at it. He used the little information he had about codes used by the MI9 section of the British military intelligence and realized that the coded words alternated between every 4th and 5th word. There was another trick that Pryor had used to hide his requests for items like maps and passports and even currency. It took 70 years for these messages to be fully decoded for the family to know what secrets that he had put in them, but they contained extremely valuable intelligence. They not only showed how the Allies were trying to create an escape plan, but how they were also passing on military intelligence. In one letter he wrote, quote, "Many seeds are left, being saved from several plants which did very well some time ago. Our last year's harvest was extremely good, well worth repeating again for this year." But it meant, quote, "HMS Undine attack failure, trawler depth charged, scuttled in 70 feet, 3 burnt." From this, experts were able to deduce a coded message about the sinking of the British submarine, the HMS Undine, which was destroyed in 1940. This just showed the incredible risks that these highly trained officials took during these times. They were resilient and extremely smart and faced this difficult challenge with a lot of bravery. Once released from prison, Pryor continued his career with the Navy until his retirement, and he passed away in 2010 at the age of 91 with an incredible legacy left behind. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!